In the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Pacific, where the silent depths concealed untold dangers, the Imperial Japanese Navy's submarine fleet emerged as a formidable, often unseen, instrument of war. For years, these steel sharks had prowled beneath the waves, their commanders imbued with a confidence forged in rigorous training and early, undisputed successes. By the outset of World War II, Japan possessed one of the most technologically advanced and numerous submarine forces globally, a fleet designed not merely for coastal defense, but for long-range oceanic operations. Their operational doctrine envisioned a dual role, complementing the formidable surface fleet by conducting reconnaissance ahead of major naval engagements and, crucially, serving as an arm of commerce raiding against Allied shipping lanes. These vessels, ranging from the mighty I-boats, capable of transatlantic ranges and even carrying small aircraft, to the more numerous medium-range RO boats, were a strategic imperative for Japan's expansive maritime dominion. In the early stages of the war, particularly from 1941 to mid-1943, Japanese submarine commanders operated with a distinct sense of invulnerability. Their prowess in navigating the immense distances of the Pacific, often undetected, allowed them to execute daring raids and vital supply missions to increasingly isolated island garrisons. These logistical arteries, often running through contested waters, were absolutely critical for sustaining Japan's outward defensive perimeter. The inherent difficulties of anti-submarine warfare at the time, coupled with the sheer size of the Pacific theater, often granted these Japanese submariners a significant tactical advantage. They perceived themselves as masters of their hidden domain, their vessels silent predators capable of striking without warning and vanishing into the abyss. Each successful patrol, each delivered cargo, each torpedo strike further cemented this deep-seated belief in their absolute operational superiority beneath the waves. The notion that an enemy could consistently hunt and eliminate their submarines with impunity seemed, at that point, nothing short of an abstract impossibility. The audacious assertions of Japanese naval superiority, frequently reinforced by successful torpedo strikes and crucial logistical deliveries, however, were about to confront a stark and brutal reality. May 1944 still saw the Imperial Japanese Navy operating its submarine fleet with a degree of confidence, particularly in the vital yet increasingly perilous task of resupply to isolated island garrisons. It was within this context that the I-16, a Type C cruiser submarine and a veteran of numerous combat patrols and transport missions, embarked on what was perceived as a routine, albeit critical, supply run to the beleaguered garrison on Buin. Her holds were laden with essential foodstuffs, primarily rice, destined for troops cut off by relentless Allied air and naval interdiction. Each successful delivery was not merely a logistical triumph, it was a reaffirmation of their submarine arms' operational efficacy and its perceived invulnerability beneath the waves. The notion that an enemy could consistently hunt and eliminate their submarines with impunity seemed, at that point, nothing short of an abstract impossibility. The audacious assertions of Japanese naval superiority, frequently reinforced by successful torpedo strikes and crucial logistical deliveries, however, were about to confront a stark and brutal reality. May 1944 still saw the Imperial Japanese Navy operating its submarine fleet with a degree of confidence, particularly in the vital yet increasingly perilous task of resupply to isolated island garrisons. It was within this context that the I-16, a Type C cruiser submarine and a veteran of numerous combat patrols and transport missions, embarked on what was perceived as a routine, albeit critical, supply run to the beleaguered garrison on Buin. Her holds were laden with essential foodstuffs, primarily rice, destined for troops cut off by relentless Allied air and naval interdiction. Each successful delivery was not merely a logistical triumph, it was a reaffirmation of their submarine arms' operational efficacy and its perceived invulnerability beneath the waves. Yet, beneath this veneer of routine and confidence, a subtle but persistent tremor of disquiet was beginning to ripple through the upper echelons of Japanese naval command. While official reports often rationalized submarine losses as the inevitable attrition of war or attributed them to a generalized increase in Allied anti-submarine warfare activity, the sheer frequency and the mystifying circumstances of certain disappearances were becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Naval analysts in Tokyo and at key forward operating bases grappled with fragmented intelligence, seeking patterns in the void where their submarines had last been reported. There was no single overwhelming anomaly they could pinpoint. No new Allied weapon system had been definitively identified, nor a radical shift in their ASW doctrine overtly observed. Instead, it was a growing statistical anomaly, a disquieting trend of vessels simply vanishing without a trace, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a chilling sense of the unknown. This developing unease, however, remained largely speculative, unable to penetrate the deeply ingrained conviction that their submarines remained masters of the deep. By mid-May 1944, the Imperial Japanese Navy's submarine force, while formidable, had grown accustomed to the brutal realities of attrition warfare. The Pacific was a vast, unforgiving arena, and losses were an expected, if tragic, facet of naval operations. Yet, the disappearance of the I-16, a vital vessel on a critical resupply mission, introduced a new, chilling dimension to these grim expectations. When the I-16 failed to report on its operational schedule, a ripple of unease spread through the combined fleet headquarters. Initial radio checks yielded only static. Unlike previous losses, which often came with telltale signs, the distinct thud of depth charge explosions echoing across the waves, the telltale oil slicks staining the ocean's surface, scattered debris, or even faint, desperate distress calls, there was nothing. The vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean simply swallowed the I-16 whole. No Allied radio intercepts hinted at a confrontation. No Japanese surface units or patrol aircraft reported any anomalies. It wasn't merely a sinking, it was a deep ocean disappearance, utterly devoid of the usual brutal fanfare that accompanied a submarine's demise. This inexplicable silence was more unsettling than any battle report. Japanese naval analysts, accustomed to piecing together the final moments of their lost vessels from fragmentary evidence, found themselves confronted with a void. A high-value strategic asset, a long-range Kaidai-class submarine, had vanished without a trace, seemingly evaporated from the deep. The initial confusion at command centers soon morphed into a creeping dread. What unseen force was at play? What new, terrifying method of anti-submarine warfare had the Americans deployed that left no physical signature, no audible clue, only an absolute and terrifying silence? This wasn't just a loss of tonnage, it was a psychological erosion, sowing seeds of doubt and fear within a command structure already grappling with the escalating intensity of the Pacific War. The silent void left by I-16 was not merely a maritime anomaly, it was a strategic enigma that reverberated with chilling force through the Imperial Japanese Navy's high command. Unlike previous losses, often marked by the telltale plumes of oil, debris fields, or frantic distress signals, I-16 had simply ceased to exist, leaving no discernible trace upon the vast Pacific. This unprecedented form of disappearance forced a reevaluation within the naval intelligence apparatus, compelling senior admirals and tactical analysts to confront a truly disquieting question. What new, undetectable weapon or method were the Americans deploying that left no physical signature, no audible clue, only an absolute and terrifying silence? This wasn't just a loss of tonnage, it was a psychological erosion, sowing seeds of doubt and fear within a command structure already grappling with the escalating intensity of the Pacific War. The silent void left by I-16 was not merely a maritime anomaly, it was a strategic enigma that reverberated with chilling force through the Imperial Japanese Navy's high command. Unlike previous losses, often marked by the telltale plumes of oil, debris fields, or frantic distress signals, I-16 had simply ceased to exist, leaving no discernible trace upon the vast Pacific. This unprecedented form of disappearance forced a reevaluation within the naval intelligence apparatus, compelling senior admirals and tactical analysts to confront a truly disquieting question. What new, undetectable weapon or method were the Americans deploying that left no physical signature, no audible clue, only an absolute and terrifying silence? Across the operational theaters, reports were meticulously scrutinized. Naval staff at the Combined Fleet headquarters grappled with fragmented intelligence, attempting to correlate the I-16's vanishing act with a disturbing pattern of other submarine losses. Was this a new, more potent depth charge, capable of disintegrating a submarine without leaving evidence? Had American sonar technology made such a leap forward that Japanese boats were being detected and tracked with uncanny precision, allowing for perfect kill shots? Or, more ominously, were the Americans employing a weapon that didn't rely on the explosive force of traditional anti-submarine warfare, something designed for a silent, deep ocean kill? The very absence of information fueled a pervasive sense of dread and speculation. Compounding this technological uncertainty was a growing, insidious suspicion. Could their communications have been compromised? The exact coordinates and mission parameters of I-16, and indeed other recent losses, suggested an American awareness that bordered on precognition. If their intricate codes were being routinely broken, then every submarine sortie, every convoy route, every strategic movement was potentially exposed to the enemy. This realization was perhaps even more psychologically damaging than the threat of a new weapon, for it stripped away the very foundation of operational security. This confluence of unknown threats, an evolving silent ASW capability, and the chilling prospect of compromised intelligence led to a profound sense of vulnerability within the Imperial Japanese Navy, fundamentally reshaping their perception of the undersea war and sowing seeds of doubt that would plague future operations. By mid-May 1944, even as the USS England was concluding its initial devastating engagement with the I-16, the Imperial Japanese Navy was proceeding with its broader strategic deployments. Central to these plans was the 7th Submarine Fleet, a critical component of Operation Eigo, the ambitious Japanese strategy to counter the anticipated American thrust into the Marianas. Their mission was clear: to establish a formidable picket line across the vast expanse of the Pacific, acting as an early warning screen for the approaching U.S. Fifth Fleet, and, crucially, to interdict American invasion forces before they could reach their objectives. These submarines, veterans of earlier campaigns, were ordered to deploy into designated patrol grids stretching from the western Pacific approaches to the Marianas. This was not merely a routine deployment. It represented a significant commitment of naval assets intended to provide the vital intelligence and forward striking capability necessary for the larger surface fleet to execute its decisive battle plan. Yet, as these silent hunters departed their bases, a subtle but pervasive sense of apprehension began to settle over their crews. Whispers of other submarines simply vanishing without a trace had circulated, far more frequently than operational accidents could explain. The Pacific, once a domain where Japanese submarines operated with a degree of confidence, was increasingly becoming a graveyard. Unbeknownst to the Japanese Naval Command, and certainly to the men below decks, their deployment coincided precisely with the heightened operational tempo of American anti-submarine warfare assets. Due to the invaluable intelligence gleaned from decrypted Japanese communications, U.S. destroyers and destroyer escorts, now thoroughly familiar with the devastating potential of the Hedgehog mortar, were actively sweeping these very waters. The 7th Fleet's patrol zone, intended as a defensive barrier, was instead becoming a meticulously charted hunting ground for an American enemy that could now strike unseen and unheard, transforming the deep into an abyss of terror. For the crew of the Imperial Japanese Navy's submarine RO-106, May 22, 1944, began like any other patrol in their assigned sector of the Philippine Sea. Unbeknownst to them, the abyss of terror recently forged by American ingenuity was about to claim its first victim from the 7th Submarine Squadron. At 0549 on that fateful morning, the American destroyer escort USS George, executing a meticulously planned search pattern, obtained radar contact on a surfaced submarine. It was RO-106, detected at a range of 17,000 yards. The contact immediately prompted the American formation to accelerate. As the USS George closed the distance, RO-106, likely detecting the approaching surface vessels, commenced a hurried dive, attempting to evade the impending threat. But this was no ordinary depth charge engagement. The USS England, a vessel specially equipped and trained in the newly refined art of anti-submarine warfare, maneuvered into position. Her forward-mounted Hedgehog mortar, a weapon designed for silent, direct impact, was primed. At 0601, just minutes after the initial detection, the USS England launched a salvo of Hedgehog projectiles. Instead of the familiar concussive explosions of depth charges detonating at preset depths, the Hedgehog rounds plunged silently, arcing ahead of the destroyer escort's bow, targeting the submarine's predicted position directly. There was no telltale ping followed by a distant rumble, only the eerie silence of the deep. Then, a series of rapid, localized detonations, not the spread-out blasts of traditional charges, but the direct, metallic thud of projectiles impacting the submarine's hull. For the crew of RO-106, the attack would have been horrifyingly sudden. One moment, the strained silence of a dive, the next, the catastrophic failure of their pressure hull as the contact-fused warheads breached their defenses. There was no opportunity for evasive maneuvers, no time to report the engagement, no chance to even comprehend the source of the devastating blows. The submarine simply ceased to exist, collapsing under the immense pressure of the deep, a rapid implosion silencing all within. From the Japanese High Command's perspective, RO-106 simply vanished. No distress call, no battle report, no oil slick or debris field to mark its grave. Just another phantom disappearance, a chilling blank entry on the operational board. This was the brutal debut of the silent killer, the Hedgehog mortar, demonstrating a new, terrifying reality. American anti-submarine warfare had evolved into an art of instantaneous, unanswerable destruction, transforming the deep into a tomb where even the dying could not scream. The grim tally for Imperial Japan's submarine fleet was escalating with alarming speed. Just days after the sinking of RO-106, the USS England, a vessel rapidly cementing its fearsome reputation, delivered another crushing blow. On May 23, 1944, the Japan-based RO-104, operating along the same ill-fated patrol line, was detected. After a grueling 2-hour cat-and-mouse game, a testament to the Japanese crew's desperate evasion tactics, the England's Hedgehog rounds found their mark. The subsequent unmistakable underwater explosion signaled the loss of yet another submarine, carrying its 58-man crew to the cold Pacific depths. The very next day, May 24th, the relentless hunt continued. RO-116, also part of the decimated 7th Submarine Division, fell victim to the USS England's predatory efficiency. A quick, decisive Hedgehog attack sealed its fate, adding another 56 lives to the growing toll. The silence after each attack was particularly unsettling for the Japanese. Unlike the telltale concussions and spray of traditional depth charges, the Hedgehog delivered a precise, silent strike, leaving no immediate surface evidence beyond the eventual debris field. This chilling lack of warning, coupled with the inability to discern the attacker's position or weapon, fostered a deep-seated dread among the remaining Japanese submarine crews. The series of disappearances was no longer mere coincidence. It was a devastating pattern. On May 26th, the USS England struck again, dispatching RO-108 with characteristic speed and finality. Within a span of just 7 days, the Imperial Japanese Navy had lost 4 of its submarines to a single American destroyer escort. The reports trickling back to Japanese command were fragmented and terrifying. Submarines were vanishing without warning, often without even a distress signal. Commanders grappled with the implications, their strategic calculus shattered. Conventional anti-submarine warfare doctrine offered no answers to these silent, unseen hunters. The American Hedgehog, though its exact mechanics were still unknown to the Japanese, was proving to be a profoundly effective and psychologically debilitating weapon, transforming the ocean depths into a terrifying, inescapable trap for Japan's submarine arm. For the Imperial Japanese Navy, The deep ocean had transformed into an unseen battlefield, a silent hunting ground where their submarines vanished without a trace. The mechanics behind these devastating losses remained a perplexing and terrifying enigma for the Japanese high command and their beleaguered submarine crews. What they didn't yet fully grasp was the revolutionary nature of the American Hedgehog anti-submarine mortar. Conventional anti-submarine warfare had long relied on depth charges, released from a destroyer's stern as it passed over a submerged target. Their effectiveness was often limited by the time delay between detection and the charge's impact, allowing skilled submarine commanders precious seconds to maneuver and evade. More critically, depth charges had to detonate near the target to cause damage, creating telltale explosions that, while destructive, also signaled a near miss. These concussive blasts offered a terrifying but crucial psychological signal. The submarine had survived, at least for the moment, and still had a chance to escape. The Hedgehog, however, represented a brutal paradigm shift. Instead of falling astern, this unique mortar launched a pattern of 24 contact-fused projectiles forward of the escort vessel. This crucial design feature allowed the attacking ship to maintain continuous sonar contact with the submarine until the very moment of impact. There was no blind spot as the escort passed over the target, no moment of uncertainty. More harrowing still for the Japanese crews was the contact-fused nature of its warheads. Unlike depth charges, a Hedgehog projectile would only detonate upon direct impact with the submarine's hull. This operational stealth was precisely what amplified the terror. For the Japanese, it meant there were no near-miss explosions, no concussive shock waves rattling the submarine, providing any indication that an attack was underway or had missed. Instead, there was often only a sudden, catastrophic explosion tearing through their vessel, frequently without any prior warning of an impending strike. Submarine commanders, accustomed to the thunderous roars of near-miss depth charges, suddenly faced an enemy whose attacks yielded only silence, followed by annihilation. The ocean depths, once a realm of strategic maneuver, became a claustrophobic coffin, where an unseen hunter could deliver a fatal blow without so much a ripple on the surface, leaving nothing but bewildered dread in its wake. Among the series of Japanese submarine sinkings that occurred in rapid succession, the final hunt by the 7th Escort Destroyer Division stood out as a testament to American persistence and Japanese desperate bravery. Their target was RO-105, another RO-100 class patrol submarine, commanded by an officer renowned for his exceptional skill and tenacity. This encounter was not a swift, decisive strike like the previous ones. Instead, it evolved into a tense battle of wits lasting over 25 hours, a grueling contest of endurance and tactics between predator and prey. On May 29, USS George and USS Raby established sonar contact with RO-105. Immediately, the submarine's talented commander demonstrated his outstanding evasion abilities. He employed every tactic available, diving deep to the limits of the vessel's structure, making abrupt course changes to break sonar contact, and sometimes lying motionless, shutting down all non-essential systems to become a ghost in the underwater shadows. The American escort destroyers, though well-equipped and trained, found themselves facing a rare and unyielding adversary. Throughout the night and into the following day, RO-105 successfully dodged numerous attacks, turning the Pacific Ocean into an arena for a high-stakes underwater game of cat and mouse. Each time George or Raby attempted to maneuver into an attack position, RO-105 would slip away, exploiting the seabed terrain or thermal layers to mask its signature. The Japanese commander's persistence was astonishing. He pushed his ship and crew to their endurance limits, hoping for a chance to break free. However, the American destroyers were equally unrelenting. They developed a coordinated hunting strategy, maintaining sonar contact, alternating pursuits and attacks, and denying RO-105 any moment of respite to surface or recharge batteries. As the hunt extended into the second day, fatigue began to take its toll on both sides. But, drawing from experience in recent hunts and recognizing this as an especially resilient opponent, U.S. Command made a crucial tactical decision. They summoned USS England. This legendary escort destroyer, with its remarkable record and battle-hardened crew, arrived on the scene on the morning of May 30. Its presence signaled the impending end for RO-105. With the coordination of 3 destroyers, the noose tightened, leaving no room for evasion. England launched a hedgehog attack, firing a salvo of mortars in a grid pattern. This time, there was no escape. The underwater explosions confirmed that RO-105, after a heroic 25-hour struggle, had finally been sunk. This was the 6th submarine destroyed by American escort destroyers in 12 days, and the 7th if including I-16. It marked the end of Japan's 7th submarine flotilla in a campaign that redefined anti-submarine warfare. With the sinking of RO-105, the Imperial Japanese Navy had suffered an almost unimaginable blow. Their entire 7th Submarine Squadron, a critical component of their forward defense and logistical network in the Marianas, had been utterly annihilated. In a brutal 12-day span, 7 of their submarines, from the seasoned I-16 to the 6 smaller R-boats, had simply vanished beneath the waves, taking with them over 500 trained submariners. For the High Command, the precise mechanics of these disappearances were shrouded in a terrifying mystery. They knew their vessels were being lost at an unprecedented rate, but the speed, coordination, and overwhelming effectiveness of the American anti-submarine tactics were beyond their immediate comprehension. This was not merely a tactical defeat, it was a profound psychological shock, bordering on existential dread for those operating in the vast, unforgiving Pacific. Reports filtering back from surviving surface units and intelligence assessments painted a grim picture. The meticulously planned patrol lines, once a symbol of their maritime reach and defensive capabilities, had become an execution ground. Each missing vessel represented not just a loss of material, but a devastating blow to morale among the submarine crews and a crushing indictment of their perceived invulnerability. Never before had an entire operational submarine unit been systematically eradicated with such ruthless efficiency. The demoralization was palpable as commanders grappled with the reality that their undersea fleet, once a potent offensive arm, was now a primary target for an unseen, relentless hunter. The immediate aftermath of the USS England's unprecedented hunting spree sent shockwaves through the Imperial Japanese Navy, instigating a period of profound strategic paralysis and enduring psychological trauma. The loss of 7 submarines in barely a fortnight, culminating in the complete eradication of Submarine Division 30, tasked with patrols in the Truk and Saipan approach routes, was not merely a numerical setback. It represented a devastating blow to Japan's already strained war effort, particularly as the Allied offensive in the Marianas intensified. These submarines were critical assets, intended for reconnaissance, interdiction of Allied supply lines, and as advanced pickets for the combined fleet. Their sudden, mysterious disappearances created a void that could not be filled, directly impacting Admiral Ozawa's ability to gain intelligence on the approaching U.S. Fifth Fleet prior to the Battle of the Philippine Sea. This crushing defeat necessitated an urgent and comprehensive re-evaluation of Japan's submarine doctrine. Prior to this, Japanese submarine tactics often emphasized offensive operations, including fleet support and long-range patrols against enemy shipping. They possessed formidable Type B and Type C cruisers capable of significant range and armament. However, the American Hedgehog, a weapon that fired contact-fused projectiles ahead of the attacking ship, negated the traditional evasive maneuvers that had previously offered a measure of safety against conventional depth-charge attacks. The Hedgehog's silent approach, lack of detonation unless a direct hit was scored, and the speed with which it could deliver a fatal blow meant that Japanese crews, once detected, faced an almost invisible and silent death from which there was little escape. Submarine commanders were forced to adopt increasingly cautious, often purely defensive, deep patrols, severely limiting their offensive capabilities and effectively removing them as a significant threat to Allied naval operations. The Imperial Japanese Navy scrambled desperately to understand and counter this new, terrifying threat. Intelligence reports and survivor testimonies, often fragmented and speculative, painted a picture of an enemy capable of striking with chilling precision and without warning. Efforts were made to develop improved hydrophones and evasive tactics, but the technological gap, exacerbated by Allied air and sea superiority, proved insurmountable. Japan simply lacked the industrial capacity and scientific infrastructure to rapidly innovate comparable anti-submarine warfare technologies or effective countermeasures against the hedgehog. The urgency was palpable, yet the resources were not. Beyond the strategic and doctrinal failures, the psychological scars inflicted upon Japanese naval personnel were profound and long-lasting. For the submarine crews, the ocean depths, once a realm of strategic advantage and stealth, transformed into a terrifying, claustrophobic tomb. The knowledge that a single, unseen American destroyer escort could track them relentlessly and deliver a lethal blow without the telltale explosions of traditional depth charges created an pervasive atmosphere of dread. The silence preceding a hedgehog attack, followed by the sudden, catastrophic impact, instilled a unique form of terror. Morale plummeted, and the once feared Imperial Japanese Navy submarine arm, which had started the war with such confidence, found itself facing an existential crisis. The silent death from below became a chilling reality, eroding combat effectiveness and casting a pall over future submarine operations, a psychological legacy that continued to haunt the fleet through the final desperate years of the war. The devastating impact of the American hedgehog, particularly during the calamitous Mariana campaign, was not merely a tactical setback for the Imperial Japanese Navy. It represented a fundamental and ultimately irreversible shift in their perception and execution of submarine warfare. The era of the hedgehog's haunting cemented a technological and strategic disadvantage that crippled Japan's underwater fleet, forever altering its role and leaving an indelible psychological scar. Prior to this period, Japanese submarine doctrine, while often innovative in its use of large, long-range vessels for fleet reconnaissance and offensive torpedo attacks, had not fully anticipated or developed countermeasures for such an effective anti-submarine weapon. The hedgehog, combined with superior American sonar, radar, and decrypted intelligence, created an operational environment where Japanese submarines were hunted with chilling efficiency. This technological chasm meant that Japanese crews often operated blind, unable to detect their pursuers or the impending doom until it was too late. The silent killer was not just a weapon, it was a symbol of their growing inferiority in the subsurface domain. Consequently, the role of Japanese submarines underwent a drastic transformation. From their initial design for offensive fleet support, often in conjunction with surface forces or as independent commerce raiders, they were increasingly relegated to desperate logistical missions. These vessels, once envisioned as strategic assets, became glorified cargo transports, ferrying vital supplies and personnel to isolated island garrisons under relentless Allied air and sea pressure. This shift from offensive projection to defensive, often suicidal, represented the broader strategic retreat of the Imperial Navy. The deep sea, once a realm of stealth and potential advantage for the submarine, morphed into a vast, silent hunting ground where Japanese vessels were the perpetual prey. The chilling memory of the silent killer permeated every aspect of Japanese submarine operations. For the crews, the once held confidence in their stealth and endurance was replaced by an pervasive dread. Knowing that they could be eradicated without warning, without even the telltale sound of approaching depth charges, fostered a deep-seated anxiety that eroded combat effectiveness and morale. This psychological toll was profound, transforming the deep-sea environment from a sanctuary into a potential tomb. It fundamentally altered Japan's perception of naval warfare, forcing a recognition that the strategic value of their submarine arm had been irrevocably diminished. The legacy of the hedgehog was not just the sunken hulls of numerous submarines, but the haunting realization that mastery of the deep had shifted decisively, leaving Japan's proud underwater fleet fighting a losing battle against an unseen, unheard, and ultimately overwhelming adversary.